What is up, my friends? Welcome back to a brand new video. I'm so excited to have you here today because I'm starting a brand new series all about playing keyboard, and it's really important to actually get our ideas from our head to the piano very quickly and efficiently. So I want to start this series and give you some of my best tips when it comes to actually playing the keyboard in a very efficient manner. So in this first video, we're going to cover how to play by ear. So basically, if you hear something on the radio or if you hear something in your mind, how do you actually translate that onto the piano? So that's going to be what we're going to be talking about today, and there's my personal 3-step process that I like to follow and that I think you should know about in order to do that. So before we do that, I want to give you 2 things. Number one, if you're interested into going into piano technique a little bit more and understanding some fundamental stuff you need to know, I want to give you a free guide called Playing with Confidence, okay? And this is all about some fundamental things that you should know about and should be practicing in order to play the piano confidently without having to stumble or spend hours plucking at the keyboard trying to find the correct notes. It basically combines 5 of the very fundamental things you should know, like scales, fingerings, chords, things like that. And I'll tell you how to practice them in a very systematic way so you can follow it, to your heart's content and basically see results right away, which is very important. So it's totally free if you want to check that in the description box below. And that leads me straight into number 2, and that is, by popular demand, I have just released my course, Piano Skills for Composers and Songwriters. So if you want to take this a step further and get into my very best training material on how to play the piano as a composer and songwriter to get our ideas into the keyboard, into Logic, Cubase, into our DAW in general, this is the course for you, because I take you from the very beginning. We talk about fundamental technique, then we cover like ear training, how to apply that technique to pieces of music, how to improvise and compose on the spot, and we build step by step to get ourselves from very beginning all the way to being improvising on the keyboard smoothly and efficiently. So that's definitely what to check out if you're interested in going super deep and understanding really how to command the piano with confidence. But without further ado, let's talk about my 3-step process for playing by ear. So let's say you're trying to figure out a song on the radio, right? And this is very fundamental to understand that the tonic or the key of the song will basically tell you a lot of information. So even if you don't have perfect pitch, this is totally fine to find it with your voice. So you might want to sing this out when you're actually trying this out. Let's use a song, for example. How about Let It Be, right? And the song goes like, dun, 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 right? So how was I able to play those chords, right? So I didn't specifically learn the song. I basically was playing by ear because I kind of remember what it sounds like, and then I basically translated that to the keyboard. But the fundamental step of knowing the key of the song is the first step. So how do you find the key? Well, you have to know where the tonic note of the scale is, or the tonic note of the key. Now, this can be a tricky thing to do, but with enough practice and enough training, this is very doable. So for example, the melody goes like, da 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 da. Let's take that one phrase by itself, right? The question you want to ask yourself is, which note sounds like it's the fundamental home of the key? Like if I had to sing on one of those notes, which note kind of feels like it's back at home, right? So then you could say, okay, maybe I'll try singing the first note. Da, da, so da, then you try to find that on the piano. Da. Okay, it's a G, right? And now you ask yourself, does this kind of sound like a major song or a minor song? In this case, it's kind of a happier key. It doesn't sound overly sad. So it might be a major key. So we test it out. Does it sound like it's in the key of G major? Da, 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 da. Da, 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 da. Something sounds a little bit off there, right? So maybe the root or the tonic of the scale isn't really G. So maybe G isn't the actual first note of the scale. What if I go like da 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 da, words of wisdom, let it be. So the word be, that sounds pretty comforting. Like that sounds like we've arrived somewhere. So maybe the word be could be the tonic, the first note of the scale. let it be. There we go. B. So that's a C. And let's see if that translates well to the song. Right? And that definitely sounds better. So one way you can do it, right, by finding the tonic is simply by singing the note that feels the most at home and then playing out that note's major scale. So in this case, I found that B, the word B, let it be, it landed on a C, and it really sounded comforting and it sounded like I reached somewhere. So I was like, okay, well, that could be the tonic note. That could be the first note of the scale. So I play the scale, and it kind of gives me that same vibe that tells me the song is in the key of C major. Like it feels like it's in the key of C major, right? The other way you can do this is you could just try to figure out the melody by ear. Like you could literally just try to play the notes one at a time on the piano by ear. So for example, if I go da 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 da, if I just try to figure out those notes, right? And then da 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 da, right? So let's say that you figured out the melody. You notice that all the notes are actually white, right? I'm actually not playing any of the black notes. No sharps or flats here. So that's another indication that I'm in the key of C major, right? So I ended on C, and that feels pretty comfortable. So that tells me that I'm most likely in the key of C major, or the C is some type of anchor point. And then the fact that I'm playing all the white notes here gives me a good indication that I'm also in the key of C. So that's the second way to do it. Rather than just trying to guess what the tonic note is just by listening to the song, you can figure out the melody first and then look at the scale notes that you're playing. Like look at all the notes that you're playing. Most of those notes should fit within the scale because the melody typically uses the notes of your scale of whatever key it's in, right? So in this case, the melody used notes entirely from the C major scale, meaning that most likely the song is in the key of C major. Okay? So that's step number one. You want to find where the key or the tonic is. So in this case, we found out that the song is in C major. And don't worry if this takes you a little bit more time, if you have to go through a couple more examples like G or D or whatever, but it definitely is worth doing that. So after you figure out the key, the second step is then to figure out the bass line, okay? And this takes a little bit of ear training too, like humming triads, being able to distinguish between the three notes, do, 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 right? Being able to hear what the root, third, and the fifth sound like. But let's say that you're able to do that. So let's say you're able to hear, like, play a chord and hum the notes, right? So if you listen to the song on the radio, right, you'll hear the chords like this. Right? So what you can do is listen for the very bottom notes of each chord, because that is what's going to tell you the bass line of the entire song, right? The bottom notes are the bass. So that's going to tell you the chord progression most likely. Now, whether it's in root position or like first inversion, second inversion, that's going to come in step 3. But step 2 is just to figure out the bass line first. So if I play this song here and just listen to the chords, I can kind of hum what the bottom note sounds like. Let me play it up an octave here so it's a little easier to see. So I'll go do, 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 do. And I'm basically just singing the bottom note. Do, 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 do. And I'm doing that because I'm able to hear what the bottom note is, right? So if you can do this, then you're starting to establish what the chord progression is, or at least what the bass line is, right? So do 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 do. You see the bass line is just 1 5 6 4, and then let's continue. Let's see if it repeats. Do 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 do. So it actually goes do 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 do. It actually goes down the scale there, right? But if you're able to just figure out what the melody is and then add in the bass line on the bottom, that will already give you 2 fundamental components of the song. That already outlines the bass, kind of implies the harmony, and the melody, which is the most important part of the song in the first place. So you can go something like, notice there's no chords yet, but all I did was I played the melody and I added in the bass line underneath. And so that already implies a little bit of harmony. So that leads us straight into step 3, which is basically to add in the chords in the middle. So what that does is fills in the rest of the chord and gives us some context to the melody. Now, for example, if I know the bass line is going to start on a C, right? Because we figured that out in step 2. If we're in the key of C major, what chord basically contains C and G? And, very simply, it's the 1 chord, right? That's the first option that comes to mind if we're in the key of C major. So the C major chord looks like this, right? So maybe I can just fill in the rest of the chord with rest of the C major chord with the notes above it, going like this. Right? And then I know the next note is going to be a G, so most likely the chord is going to change there as well. So what chord kind of starts on G? Well, we have G major, right? That's the 5 chord. So let's see how that sounds. Sure, it sounds a little bit deep, but the quality is correct, right? And then how about the next one? We know it's going to go up to A, so why don't we try A minor? Add in some of the notes there to give it the full chord. So back to C, A minor, and then F, probably F major, right? And then let's continue. F, E, D, C, kind of like that. So all we did in step 3 here was we took that bass line, but we added the triads on top according to what the key was, right? Because if we're in the key of C major, we know all the notes are going to be white anyway. If I was in the key of G major, then I know if I play the 5 chord on D, I'm going to need that F sharp in there because the G major scale has an F sharp in there, right? But in this case, we're in the key of C, so we know that whatever left hand or whatever chords I'm playing in the left hand, most likely it's going to be only white notes, okay? Now, I was pretty lucky because all of these chords are basically in root position, but you might have some chords that actually are in inversions. So maybe something like, maybe the bass line went down to a B and you had to do the first inversion of the 5 chord instead of the root position, right? So that's something you also have to keep into consideration is the chord actually in root position? Because if it's not, then you'll have to figure out what it is from there. But the best thing you can do is really to start from root position, right? And then basically just go from there. If it doesn't sound right, if it doesn't match the song, then most likely that bass note is not the root of the chord. Maybe it's the 3rd of the chord, like an A minor chord, or maybe it's even the 5th of the chord, like F major, for example, if I'm using C as an example. So I hope that kind of makes sense. And then, after that, you can always blend it in a little bit more. After you get the basic triads, right? You can also go like, so you can make it a little more beautiful, but most importantly is being able to identify what those basic chords are first, and then knowing exactly what the melody is on top so you can play them together. Because you can always make it fancy later, but being able to grasp those fundamental chords is very basic and very, very important. So I hope that kind of makes sense. Just to recap, step 1 is figuring out the melody, right? You can either figuring out the tonic, you can hum the tonic to yourself and then try to figure out the major scale or the minor scale, depending on if it's a happy or sad song. The other method to do that is to play the melody by ear. So we kind of demonstrated that. And we figured out that it was kind of in C major because all the notes that I played were basically white notes. So that's really good evidence right there. So figuring out the melody is step 1. Step number 2 is adding in the left hand or the bass line. So really picking out what those bottom notes are playing, and then that will give us the information for the harmony for the most part. Most likely they're going to be root notes, but you also might have some inversions and other bass notes in there as well. And then step 3 is being able to fill in the rest of the chord given those bass notes. So instead of just playing like this, you go fill in the rest of the chord, right? And again, they might not all be in root position, but it all depends on what the song is doing. Right? And you can really improvise from there. But hopefully that makes sense. If you have any questions about the process, please leave it as a comment below. I'm more than happy to help out and kind of help you play a little better by ear, because it really is a skill that it is like a lifelong skill, and you can train your ear at any age. So it's better late than never, but definitely a really cool skill to have if you are a composer or songwriter and you want to just be able to get your ideas down faster. This is definitely a process that I recommend you practicing every single day, or at least every other day, because again, if you can do this, then nothing is impossible. So before you go, I want to remind you that the free guide is there in the description box for you, Playing Piano with Confidence. It just covers the very fundamental techniques that you should be able to do with your hands before doing something like this, like playing by ear. Because in order to do that, you should already be able to play the piano to some degree. So that guide will help you with that. But if you're interested in like a full-fledged course on actually how to play from start to finish and improvise on the spot and all of that, and find a structured approach, I want to offer my Piano Skills for Composers and Songwriters course to you. If you're interested, feel free to click the link in the description box below, check that out. And again, if you have any questions about that or the video at all, more than happy to help out. Again, I want to thank you for watching, take care, and I'll see you in the next video. Take it easy, bye-bye.